Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We are delighted to share with you an exclusive preview of our 2022 research report from our collaboration with Carousell Media Group. This is all on digital disruption trends, attitudes to shopping and sustainability across Southeast Asia and Hong Kong. My name is Miranda. I am the Regional CEO of the IAB Southeast Asia and India. And it has been an absolute pleasure to work very, very closely on this project, which has been incubated over the past 4 months. This multi-language research study was conducted across 5 key markets: Singapore, Philippines, Malaysia for both Carousell and the local Mura marketplace, Vietnam for Chotop, which is their local marketplace, and Hong Kong. We then distilled each local market report down into an overall regional report, and these are the numbers we're going to be taking you through today. This regional survey builds upon our 2021 survey to better understand the shopping behaviours of citizens across the region. Our report published last year that specifically looked into millennial buying behaviours has been downloaded more than 60,000 times from our website. In the 12 months between surveys, we've seen a seismic shift in changes in the digital economy. The global pandemic has led to a digital disruption on a scale that has never been seen before, spurred on by the migration of users from offline to online with this new stay-at-home paradigm. Southeast Asia is definitely at the forefront of the stampede, adding 60 million new internet users in just over a year, bringing internet penetration to 75% across the region. What we're seeing with this is that digital is now pioneering social activism, with people leveraging online platforms for health, wellness, and self-improvement. Our hyper-engaged audiences are also shopping sustainably to protect the planet. And more importantly, most respondents intend to do more in these areas over the next 12 months. I'm now delighted to introduce Sanya Gupta, Head of Client Strategy at Carousell Media Group, who will be presenting with me our 2022 Commerce Disruption Trends Research Report. Sanya, help me paint the picture of this rise of recommerce and sustainability that we're seeing.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Miranda. And I must just let you all know, I'm so excited to be presenting this along with Miranda. It's been a labor of love for the past 3-4 months, just putting this all together. And we're very excited to share all the findings that we've had. It's opened up our minds, so I'm hoping that it will for you as well. Just as a precursor to this, what's very interesting about this survey is that we actually had more than 61,000 respondents to this survey. So if you think about this, the results you're going to be seeing in the next few slides, the next hour, are a very good representative sample of what the countries of Southeast Asia and Hong Kong are actually thinking. And let's dive right into it. And the most interesting thing that we found through our survey was the attitude on sustainability. Just to throw back to the survey Miranda had mentioned earlier, we had done a 2021 survey on millennials, and we found this staggering number from the 2021 survey. We found that 95% of millennials in Southeast Asia that we had actually surveyed felt that purchasing pre-owned items is the more sustainable option than maybe buying from sustainable fast fashion brands, etc. This was a huge number that was very interesting to us and kind of a motivator for us in this new survey to understand more about the future purchasing habits, in particular with sustainability. So in 2022, when we asked more in-depth questions on sustainability, we found that the 60% of all our respondents said across the board from most of the markets say that they will actually increase their sustainable shopping over the next 12 months. This is a staggering number to think about the state it was actually in already and where it's predicted to grow. This is the average number across our regions, but in some countries, we're actually seeing 87% of the respondents say that they'll increase this shopping. So amazing interesting numbers here, but what we see is that we want to go even deeper to understand, why do people actually care about sustainability in our regions? What's motivating them to actually make sustainable purchases? So you see in the next slide that consumers are getting very smart about how they approach sustainability. Based off our previous survey, we had seen that most people in our last year's survey were being with sustainably shopping to save money. What's changed is that, especially if you see in a market like Singapore here, the red bar indicating the concerns, people buying sustainability due to climate change concerns, and there's options to reduce environmental impact and circular economy. This is overshadowing the amount of people that are doing it to save money. This is a big change in the mindset of the consumers in Southeast Asia, where it's obviously a great way to save money, but it's more of a core value for them now to focus on maybe how they can actually help the environment and address these climate change concerns. The consumers are now so much more smarter about how they're approaching sustainability. The younger millennials and Gen Zs are actually now focusing on researching a brand's environmental footprint. They're more aware of greenwashing, where brands are wrongly advertise clothing as being eco-friendly. But most of all, they are shopping less for new clothing, where they are focused on this other insight that we found out from our survey, where personal accountability and actions by yourself is actually the preferred way to action out their sustainable shopping, rather than expecting brands to do it for you. And so that's very interesting in this change in mindset for the consumers. And overall, if you really think about it, buying sustainably made fashion is a good way to really go about it, but buying less and buying pre-loved and secondhand goods is the easiest and most effective way to really be sustainable. And you can really focus on making secondhand your first choice while shopping.
That is so true. And I think that another challenge that we're seeing in Southeast Asia and Hong Kong is that with the sluggish income growth amongst youth, many just simply don't have the purchasing power to exclusively buy sustainable and ethical brands that are, let's be honest, sometimes more expensive. And so what we're seeing is that there is this need for a more wallet-friendly option that allows people to practice their sustainability values. And this is really driving users to Recommerce marketplaces.
Yeah, and so true. And it's not a new phenomenon. Maybe some of the older consumers can relate more to the fact that secondhand has already been their first choice for a lot of products. For example, cars, property, electronics, and luxury items such as watches and handbags. It's secondhand is already your first choice for those items. So this isn't a new trend, but it's a trend that's picking up in most e-commerce sectors. Some of the sectors that, for example, are the biggest on Carousell, other than cars, property, is, for example, sports and exercise equipment. This is become one of the most searched categories on Carousell, sometimes even overshadowing the Rolex searches, which is a big deal. So people are looking for bikes in particular. The way that people are now picking up biking, they're upgrading their bikes as they become better. They're able to sell pre-loved bikes, which maybe were used for a few months, but they've decided to try out a new form of biking. All of these systems have come across on Carousell, and it's now one of the most searched categories. This was not something that was predicted a while back. And yeah, it's really interesting to see new categories pick up as well.
Look, when we talk about people being adverse to greenwashing, look, I do have to say that through the course of this project, it was quite interesting to find out more about what Carousell's sort of position was and how they contribute to carbon offsets. So aside from creating communities for sustainable purchasing, can we just quickly recap what Carousell is doing in terms of carbon offsets?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, by making transactions on a Recommerce marketplace like Carousell can actually offset close to 150,000 tons of emissions in a year. Sorry. So if you think about it, they've actually offset the carbon emissions of 22,000 Singaporeans in just a year. It's a very interesting way to actually look at carbon emissions. And sometimes these type of things are so much more effective than carbon credits and other ways that maybe other brands are talking about.
Thank you, Sanya. Look, in last year's survey and webinar, we spoke about how the Recommerce market was a $24 billion market, but now we're seeing secondhand become an even larger global phenomenon. In fact, the global secondhand apparel market will grow 3 times faster than the global apparel market overall. It's forecasted to reach 220 billion globally by 2026. But this number doesn't even count China. Taking China into account, we're at the threshold of possibly a $300 billion market globally by 2026.
I mean, yeah, those are just amazing numbers to think about, from being a 24 billion market to this. And it really comes down to how fast the markets can change due to necessity. Necessity is really the mother of invention here. And during the pandemic, we saw so many more consumers actually shopping online. And most of this time that they're shopping online, they're doing online shopping. So it's a new trend that's picked up for e-commerce to grow. But what is very interesting is, with these new breed of consumers, how does Recommerce play in over here? And if you see, Recommerce brands around the world are just exploding. If you shop from a few global partners, you would see brands like The Real, Vistair Collective, or other than just eBay, really picking up and offering all of these Recommerce services as well. ThreadUp, which offers a wide channel services for brands to actually start up their own Recommerce solutions. If you look in China, I'm not sure if you've heard about Idle Fish, it is Taobao's secondhand market. So Taobao itself is getting into it, and which is going to be a huge explosion soon. In Japan, we have something called Brand Off. And in Australia, there's sustainable Recommerce sites like Blue Spinach. And when you look at Southeast Asia, I'm not sure if everyone's aware, for someone like Carousell, we have acquisitions in the top Recommerce sites across the region, be it Muda in Malaysia, Chotot in Vietnam, we have Refash, Oxstreet, Oxlux in Singapore, bringing all of these brands who have become really good at what they do within one banner to actually be able to build out a Southeast Asia presence. So we see so many brands across globally that have sprung up for this big explosion in the market that we're planning to see. And it's not just Recommerce brands. You see here, these are all a few like third-party brands or individual Recommerce brands. We're seeing that brands themselves are super invested in getting involved in Recommerce. It's really a myth that brands are maybe scared of it or don't want to touch it or want to kind of ignore it, because they realize that this is not a passing trend. So we've seen some very interesting things in market. For example, IKEA in Singapore, they just launched a partnership with Carousell, where they are actually creating an online store where people can purchase secondhand IKEA goods. So they're embracing this trend in market where people buy and sell secondhand IKEA goods, which are in great condition already. And they're putting their name on it. They're understanding that this is how consumers are selling. So let's really own that. What we are doing with Recommerce is offering services on top of that. For example, Carousel Protection, which assures that the transaction will go through. There's an exclusive rewards program for IKEA sales as well through this program. And more than anything else, the belief that this is what is going to be very important to consumers is that this has also been brought offline into the IKEA showrooms in Singapore, which showcases some of the big secondhand goods that are being sold through this. So it's just a perfect example of a brand not just paying lip service to these consumers and embracing this new age of shopping. And if you look globally, I'm not sure if anyone's ever looked for vintage Levi's before, but it's a huge trend, and especially young consumers who are looking for the best deal, who are looking for things unique. A big trend in market is finding these vintage Levi's and being able to showcase your personality through it. if any of you are into this, you should really visit Levi's secondhand goods store. It's just called Secondhand Store by Levi's, and where Levi's recognize this and does a buyback program from their users of the jeans that they don't use. And as you know, jeans just get better the more you use it. It becomes softer and more malleable, but people want new trends. So they do a buyback program, give them vouchers, but also resell it on this e-commerce site. Just an amazing way for a brand to actually take a consumer insight and actually make it come to life through this.
Great examples. And I think it's worth noting here that we've talked about brand examples, but when we talk about Recommerce in terms of empowering consumers, I want to highlight what we saw happen in Vietnam. And 11% of respondents stated that they use Cho Tot as a main source of income. And what we also saw in Vietnam was the highest number of self-employed respondents. So 33% of all respondents on carousel marketplaces use it for their side income. So between the respondents in Vietnam who were able to shift into kind of almost being entrepreneurs and being self-employed, we've also seen overall that marketplaces are allowing people to have economic independence, really.
Yeah, and that was such an interesting number for us to really look at. We weren't expecting that. 11% of all our respondents, and this was in the in the tens of thousands that are actually using it as a main income. So that was really interesting for us to see, and just gives you an idea of the overall economic empowerment that is being given to people on the other side of the end with e-commerce marketplaces like this. So yeah, it was a great insight for us as well. And I'm very interested to see how this number rises, how it changes, and seeing whether more people in other countries also start using it as a main income source.
Definitely. And you know, for the audience, I think that let's translate this into what does this mean for advertisers? And we've pulled out 4 key insights that we found from this year's survey. The first is Millennial and Gen Z's adoption of the circular economy. The second is consumers' desires to access goods at a discount. The hunt for the bargain is still a prime reason and prime motivator. Also, we're seeing this kind of best-in-class e-commerce functionality be brought into Recommerce, so you can get more of that premium, tailored, having what you want when you want it, created through these marketplaces as well. And also, very importantly, environmental consciousness. But Sonia, could you just expand a little bit more on number 1, because I know that this is an area you're really interested in.
Yeah, and you've got it exactly right. These are the top 4 things that really stand out. But number 1 is really about these new consumers, the millennials and Gen Zs, right? It's a new breed of shoppers that have come about, which are really going to drive the shopping for the next 50 years. And their considerations for consuming goods has changed significantly. While there might have been a prejudice against secondhand goods previous generations had, this new generation's abandoned all those prejudice. They don't care whether it's secondhand. It's actually a sense of pride to actually have secondhand goods now for this generation. So that prejudice is gone. But it's because of a few reasons that this prejudice has gone for these consumers. Number 1 thing that we talk about is that this generation is actually the most photographed generation in our time. If you're the most photographed generation, for them, variety is key. They want to keep it up to date and make sure that they look trendy in all things. And with variety, uniqueness also plays a part here. To find that unique item comes with a secondhand good immediately. Vintage, thrift shops, those were the type of things that were providing to this uniqueness before, but now it's available at the tip of your, with your mobile phone easily. So that's one thing. And more than anything else, they're very economically savvy now. So they take pride in knowing that they've struck a good deal, these consumers. So that plays into this whole part. And finally, they're environmentally conscious. They know that the world that they've been given is not the best. They know that they need to start making changes to make sure that it's going to be livable for them when they grow up. So this secondhand generation has done a very unique thing. They have made secondhand cool. And that's what is really fascinating about this. And when you now talk about pre-loved and secondhand goods with this, with millennials and Gen Zs, they take it as a sense of pride if they own some. So that's been the most fascinating thing for us to understand and really bring out to be a part of how we also address our consumers.
Awesome. So now that we've set the scene for Recommerce and sustainability, let's dive into the regional survey results, starting with financial habits and people's spending plans for the next 12 months.
Sure. Yeah, and just for context, we really wanted to drill down into understanding our marketplace users for the next 12 months, in understanding what they care about, and really making sure that we cater to them in the most appropriate manner. So the first thing that we're going to look out at is the financial habits of the respondents. And this is really about how they're saving, what they're spending on, if they're taking loans, what are they going to be taking out loans for. And the first most important point that we saw was that 6 out of 10 respondents are saving more this year than they were in the previous year. 1/3 say they're saving the same, but while only 3% say that they're saving less. This generation is really building up that savings pool for themselves. And we'll see in the next few points why they're doing that. We see that the respondents are so much more financially focused on planning for the future. And we see that if you look at this, this gives a detail of the reasons for why people might be taking out loans in the next 12 months. And we see that the most important ones you need to pay attention to here is purchasing property. Property purchases here are going off the roof. In the last 2 columns, you'll see that 32% people were taking out a loan to purchase a property in the last year, but 46% on average are planning to do it for the next 12 months. So these consumers are now more financially focused on planning for the future. They're looking for big item purchases like property and loan, rather than actually spending on new luxury items, especially given the pandemic and the current downturn in the economy. And at these dire times, people are focused more on what they need rather than they want. So the focus is on these big purchases rather than maybe spending money on luxury items just now. And there's one outlier though, when you think about this. People are still hungry for something beyond these big purchases. They are really hungry for travel. This is a unique outlier and maybe an obvious outlier after all this time, but other than making property and auto purchases in the next 12 months, people are focused on spending on travel. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see that international and domestic travel over here is even higher than purchasing the primary property for respondents. So very interesting space here where we have different countries also having different attitudes to travel. And it's really in full swing in Asia, especially with the reopening. And maybe Miranda, you can take us through some of the unique sensibilities of each of the markets.
Yeah, definitely. With half of our respondents planning to travel within the next 12 months, we're seeing the Vietnamese are focused on domestic travel, Singaporeans are focused on international travel, Malaysian and Filipinos are looking at both, with great locations available in both countries. However, Hong Kongers do have a lower than average enthusiasm for travel, but given the time that this survey was conducted and the severe lockdown restrictions within Hong Kong, that could have probably impacted some of the responses. And with all of this travel going on, you shared with me a really interesting piece of information around the search trends that you'd seen on Carousell. Do you mind just going through that?
Yeah, of course. And the search terms might be slightly different from other places. You might get some insights on the travel audience right now. But in Singapore, for example, the viewers might know that people are rushing out to the immigrations authority to actually get their passports renewed, but that's not the only thing. People are now rushing out to really extensively search for luggage brands. They're looking out for new luggage brands that they are buying secondhand off Carousell. So we've seen almost a 3-digit increase in the searches for luggage brands like Samsonite, American Tourister. Another thing is that something we forget when we talk about travel. When we think about travel, we only think about maybe booking flights or hotels. What is super interesting about travel is that they are domestic attractions that people are flying in for. Like, for example, in Singapore, we have the F1 concerts and race that's going to happen soon. We have concerts for Justin Bieber and Jay Chou happening. We know people all across the region who are flying in for this. And what we've seen is an astronomical rise in the tickets and vouchers category within Carousell. We are seeing a 214% increase in the category active users of this category and a 695% increase in listing views. That is astronomical. So people are really interested in getting out there. Once they're out to all these countries, like, where do we actually go? What do they actually do? So that was very interesting to see this huge increase.
And also hugely heartwarming to see
Yeah.
a return to kind of the vibrant tourism that we've all been used to in the region.
Yeah, it's amazing to see people coming in and out, and it's something that we are all very excited for.
Okay, now I want to drill down more into financial behaviours and start to look particularly at attitudes towards investments. And what's interesting here is that we've seen like a real range by market in terms of people who are risk averse and looking for more kind of stable investments, and those are open to, shall we say, more speculative investments.
Yeah. This is very interesting to see as well. So we've polled people on what their current average investments are and what their future investments are going to be. As you can see, most of the people in this region currently are going to be focused on stocks. They were already currently focused on stocks. Property and crypto are close second and third. Bonds are a fourth. But within this, there's a very interesting difference in countries. We see Hong Kong is actually very risk averse. And they're likely to stick to stocks and bonds as a form of investment. And even in the future, the Hong Kong split between stocks and bonds doesn't change. And you know what? We did this survey 5 to 6 months back. The market has changed considerably since. So I'm thinking the risk averseness of each of these countries might change. But what we saw back then was that people were being driven, though people were still focused on maybe investing in crypto, what people really ties back into the financial saving habits and the loan taking habit. Property was the only investment vehicle in the next 12 months that actually increased. So we see that property, people want stable investment, especially maybe when they've gone through a pandemic and they didn't have a great place to live at. They wanted a stable environment to live at and invest in. And we saw property really rise up. And I'm sure if we're looking at now the next 12 months, if we did this survey again now, this would change considerably as well, given the market conditions and the possibility of an economic recession on hand as well. But I think the idea that people are really focused on stable investments like property is great. Something that we saw, which was very interesting, was that 73% of the respondents across all markets, including some of the less developed ones to the more developed ones, were considering using online trading apps and actually crypto trading apps. So we see this huge opening of these markets to actually embrace crypto while also looking at stable investments. So that was an interesting thing, but like I mentioned, things might change a little bit over the next 12 months, even more. So yeah.
And I think also with contactless payments exploding as a result of the pandemic, with safe distancing, we've seen the rise and sometimes the quite swift fall of high-risk currencies. And this is going to be a really interesting space to watch. But moving on from finance, the next category that we looked at was how people are spending their time online. Sonia, do you want to take us through some of these highlights?
Yeah, of course. So we did this survey and we gave some top reasons for how people are spending time online. But as you can see in the other categories, there's so many other ways people were doing. These are just the top ones. And there's some obvious ones and there's some real outliers here, which we really drill down deeper into and form a big opportunity for us. Some obvious ones are streaming mainstream content. This is the largest way that people are spending online. Obviously, as mobiles have become more prevalent in Southeast Asia, this is going to even skyrocket. A very surprising second one over here is online learning, almost as much as streaming mainstream content. That's average across all our markets. We're seeing online learning be a huge part about how people are spending time online. Online supermarket shopping, ordering in meals from restaurant, those are up there as well. Another outlier here, which we found interesting, was streaming independently made content. This ties back into the millennials and Gen Zs and this way for them to be more unique and looking out for unique content choices as well. And fitness, exercise, gaming or sports was there as well. We saw a lower amount of e-gaming options here than we thought. That was a bit surprising, but maybe that's a little bit more of a niche audience that we surveyed, because learning a language actually took up 23% over here of how the respondents are spending their time online. So some surprising ones over here. And if you look, and we also looked at in the next 12 months, and maybe it's a hangover from COVID, but across all of these categories, we didn't see streaming, online supermarket shopping really increase. What we saw was the only categories to increase over the next 12 months on how respondents want to spend time online was online learning and fitness and exercise and learning a language. So really, there's a huge focus on respondents focusing on their personal and professional development over here.
And what's also interesting here is that we also dissected respondents by age group. And we saw with millennials and Gen Zers that they're investing more time in online learning, fitness, learning a new language, streaming content and gaming, whereas Gen X is spending more time on task-oriented activities such as online supermarket shopping and ordering meals online. And what this does is this creates a new opportunity for brands to cater for these needs. So you have the personal and professional development that can be included in creative executions for campaigns. But if we take the number one category for how people spend their time online, which is streaming mainstream content, this is a super interesting category to look at, because what we saw was 57% of respondents had subscribed to one or more streaming service over the past 12 months, with 26% of respondents planning to subscribe to more streaming services over the next 12 months.
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge amount of streaming services, and we obviously are going to have the full reports. So we have regional and local reports available. And if you go into which you'll be able to download through IAB's website coming tomorrow, you'll be able to see each local market's streaming landscape. And it's amazing to see the number of streaming platforms that are now available in each local market. A minimum, as maybe we'll see later on for a market, there are minimum of like at least 6 to 7 big local players. It's a very fragmented market as well, with obviously some market leaders like Netflix. But again, looking at the current market environment that we've seen with Netflix recent earnings, we saw that even they are going to be looking at a slower growth of some new subscribers. But something that coincided with our research was the subscribers for Disney Plus and HBO Go. The subscribers for this are going to be growing at double-digit percentages compared to Netflix, which has kind of the market share right now. And we saw a very fascinating number where 50% of people who are not subscribed to Disney Plus, but they plan to subscribe to it in the next 12 months. So this is the opportunity to really reel in all those users who are looking for new streaming platforms, be it global or local.
Look, I think you've just touched on it briefly before, but one thing that we are really seeing, and I've used our Vietnam results here as an example, is that we're seeing local streaming options steal market share from the global players. You know, this is really apparent in Vietnam, where, look, there is certainly a Netflix dominance, but what we're seeing is that the local players, when you combine them, is certainly a huge competition. So I guess when we look at charts like this, what does this mean for advertisers and publishers?
Yeah, and looking at a chart like this and looking at market conditions and the earnings results from Netflix, it's bringing this new trend about ad-supported streaming platforms. Most of the local players actually already do it. They already have an ad-supported platform that's really driving the revenues from them, along with the subscription model. But this is going to become global now. With Netflix adopting to it, it's a matter of time before more and more of the services do it. Disney Plus also has it on plan as well. So for advertisers and brands, it's a little bit of a tangent, but to think about it in this new way, that we have an opportunity to actually invest now in connected TV and the rise of OTT platforms that are going to be in market. With more of these global platforms like the market leader Netflix coming onto it, the opportunities are going to be endless for us. And I'm so excited by that idea, because what we can do is we have so many good first party data platforms now, for example, even Carousell, where we can meld the data, where we can take their purchasing behavior and user behaviors and bring it on to these connected TV and OTT platforms. So as an advertiser or brand, I'm going to be looking at it from that point of view, where I'm seeing the rise of these platforms, local and global, and how can I actually invest in this growth, in these growing platforms, and especially local platforms, because that's where the real growth is going to come from, and local, and you finding local consumer insights as well.
All excellent points. Before I move on to our next category, I just want to let you know that we do have time for Q&A. So if you have questions, please use the Q&A function and pop them in there, and we have some time reserved at the end of this session. And what we're going to look at now is what influences purchasing decisions. We were quite surprised at these results, because as much as you hear people complain about how intrusive advertising is, it actually works. We saw that advertising and in-store promotions across the region still heavily influence purchasing decisions, especially in Malaysia and Vietnam. And in Vietnam, advertising is actually the biggest deciding factor.
Yeah, and I think it plays a little bit to, the markets are still developing here, right? The users are actually still excited by the advertising that we have here, versus maybe a more developed market like Australia, for example, where I know I've done previous surveys and the number heavily goes on the other direction. So it's very unique in Southeast Asia that all the users that you're reaching out to are actually more open to it, and they want to have brands that actually understand them well and give them the most appropriate maybe promotion or consumer message that speaks to them. So that's the unique factor about Southeast Asia, especially, right? And we diving a little bit deeper into this. If you look at just higher priced items, if you're looking at luxury items, the trend is that it's going more into need-based buying behavior rather than want-based. And actually, if you're looking at higher priced items, respondents are looking for a bargain. They're looking to purchase something on maybe a sale season, rather than just, oh, I like this, I'm going to buy it right now. So the same trend continues where people are looking for a good discounted price and maybe even buying pre-loved items to satisfy this need. And that plays really well with more and more platforms coming up who are satisfying this. For example, Oxlux. It's a secondhand luxury goods platform that hosts watches, handbags, pre-loved luxury items, really. But what it does is more than just listing them. It gives them additional Recommerce services. For example, authentication. That's a huge big part about doing luxury purchases to make sure that the item that you're getting is genuine, to shipping and delivery, money guarantees, and something that I actually haven't seen before are trial services. You can actually try on what a handbag might look on you, what a pre-loved luxury item might look on you. So that's something new that they're giving as well. So again, such an amazing slew of companies in this region that are catering to the consumer's need to fulfill this behavior to get higher priced luxury items at a discounted rate.
I think that this is such an interesting space, especially when we look at what's happened in the Northern Hemisphere, where we're seeing a specific re-commerce market for celebrity and influencer fashion. You know, everything from Kardashian Closet, where you can buy the Kardashians' unwanted Birkins in Balmain, or Depop, where you can buy items worn by social media stars such as Olivia Rodrigo, to supermodels such as Emily Ratajkowski. As you said before, we're talking about the most photographed generation ever, and the ability to show range, not repeat outfits, and also emulate those that you admire. And I think that if Asia does follow this trend, I think it's going to be even more of a phenomenon, because each market in the region has its own super celebrities, but then you also have those who have a wider appeal, such as Jay Chow.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know about the Kardashian Closet before you told me about this, actually, and I went and researched it. It's all very affordable, and I remember, like, that's such an interesting market that I didn't even know existed. So there's so much innovation still to come into this region that we're just ripe for, this whole region. So very, very exciting.
Well, I think also another example that we did chat about, where it was Love Island, which was one of the UK's largest reality TV show, previously was sponsored by a fast fashion brand. And this year, in their 8th season, their main sponsor is eBay, with a specific view on sustainable fashion.
Yeah, they've basically got a stylist who focuses on secondhand fashion, and she actually has created a whole closet of all secondhand goods that they can literally shop off during the show. And if you think about it, you kind of understand why Love Island's done this, because who's their target audience? The target audience is the millennials and Gen Zs, whose values these are focused on. So it's kind of a no-brainer for them, but gives you a real life example of more and more how this is coming onto the mainstream.
So I think that taking all of these points, let's distill it down into what do these survey results mean for advertisers?
Yeah, so something that I've been talking about for a while now is this new generation of consumers, because it's just so exciting. Like we mentioned about the millennials and Gen Zs, they're more value focused and they're more economically savvy, and they're looking for this variety of clothes. And we see brands like Levi's and IKEA really catering to that. So this new generation of consumers that advertisers really need to focus on. And what we need to think about is that they're shopping in places that embody the values that they care about. So we need to find that nexus of where they're going and the values that they care about. So that's going to be the challenge for advertisers, to find that link between what they want to promote and where their consumers actually are.
And I also think that with point 3, this mix of global and local platforms in Southeast Asia and Hong Kong, is that consumers are increasingly on a mix of global and local media global and local platforms, and they will interchange between the two however they so wish. So how do advertisers move beyond the global platforms that have held a monopoly traditionally to deliver disproportionate ROI? So we have to learn to embrace and support these local platforms and media plans. You know, we saw in Vietnam, and when you access all the local reports tomorrow, you will see the power from food delivery to content that people are streaming, that the local options and the local players are serious contenders, and they really shouldn't be ignored.
Definitely. And I love that, because it's been thought about for a while, like localization is the way to win this region. But it gets forgotten. Sometimes we have full marketing teams sitting in Singapore buying media for Vietnam, buying media for Hong Kong. And you get lost in that local play. But what these survey results really showed was to really understand consumer insight markets, because each of these markets behave so differently. It was almost hard for us to create a regional report, because they're so different in the way that they behave, that you have to really have maybe people in market, maybe you have to have extensive surveying ability of these and understand local platforms to actually win in these markets. Actually, another thing that we touched on a bit, but not that much, something that most people are focused on is the travel comeback. But like I mentioned before, I want advertisers to start thinking a bit differently about it, finding maybe tangent industries around it, other than maybe airlines, insurance, and hotels, trying to find out how are the other ways that we can get our consumers more excited about travel and create a better experience. Everyone's out and traveling about, right? Like, how do we participate in making a better travel experience for everyone who comes into our country or are traveling? Yeah, so I think those are the three things that I would take away.
And if we were to look into our crystal ball and you know, predict the future.
Yeah. So my predictions for the future would be that secondhand will be the first choice. Not in 10, 15, 20 years. The future is very near for this. I expect Recommerce, if you've heard some of the examples we've given, it's to be as ubiquitous as e-commerce soon. And that really might be a bit harder for some people, maybe some of the older generation above 35. It might be a little harder to believe that secondhand can be first choice, but you've seen the seismic shifts in streaming, in online food delivery, these things that were not predicted before, people weren't very comfortable with before. For example, delivery. It wasn't that far back, maybe 10 years back, that sometimes the only delivery riders on market would be pizza delivery boys. And from that, it's already made such a big change, right? So the future is near in terms of re-commerce as well, and we expect it to be as big as e-commerce. But there is a point that re-commerce platforms need to provide for it to reach that level. We need to continue providing a seamless process that the e-commerce services provide. So we have to give them shipping and delivery services, a must to have. If you read any article right now on e-commerce sites or read anything about the industry, the main reason why people are moving from e-commerce site to the other is shipping and delivery services. If you can give it to me within 2 hours, I'll take that over a same day, even the next day delivery. That's just the reality of the market, which is not very environmentally consciousness focused, but that's what it's coming to. So how do you bring that together? And reward systems, payment options, so tie-ups with fintech companies, and most of all, variety and uniqueness that can be offered through this. So and just to bring this point about what Carousell did recently, which I never thought about before, but kudos to our acquisition team. They acquired Refash, and Refash is a service where you and I, maybe we have a closet to declutter, which I always have, which I never get around to, but I'm a time-starved seller here. What you can do is you can ship in all your items, and they would actually rank it in terms of how good they are placed, and they would sell it for you, and they would just take a commission, but you'd be able to actually do that entire service. So brand new innovation that I didn't know about before, being able to really cater to a time-starved seller. So all of these innovations will really focus on making these predictions true.
So I have to say that with a service like Refetch, I always have the best of intentions to declutter. But then when I think about in between, your day job and life and everything else, sometimes it's very hard to translate that intention into actuality. So that's certainly a service that I'm really, really excited about, and I think will motivate me to declutter more, because I probably need to as well. But I think for me, my biggest prediction for the future is this intersection of luxury, celebrity, and the everyday person. Through Recommerce, you're able to get closer to, emulate, even own something from somebody that you really admire and you feel represents yourself. And then that kind of has a ripple effect wider into what we're seeing with sustainability, where we're also seeing Recommerce become really popular amongst street culture. There are a number of high-profile musicians, also high-profile sports stars, who have kind of made it their look to wear unique pieces from the 80s and the 90s, and then they talk about how important it is to have provenance in items and the story behind it and who was the designer at that time. So I think that just the impact on wider pop culture is going to be really interesting to watch.
And was it ASAP Rocky that you mentioned who was making waves in this?
Absolutely. So not only is he a fashion icon, but it's actually ASAP Rocky, the late Virgil Abloh. These are stars in their own rights who have really embraced sustainable fashion and made it, a real pinnacle of street fashion today.
Yeah. I've learned so much from you. It's great.
I'm going to pause now. Do we have any questions from the audience? I'm just going to give a minute in case anybody wants to pop anything in. As mentioned, all of these reports, that's the local market reports and the regional reports, will be available on our website, IABSEA+India.com, tomorrow from 9 a.m. SGT, which is GMT +8. So as we have no questions, I just want to say a huge thank you to Sanya, Jolyn, JJ, your amazing design team, and also to the IAB team behind the scenes, Adele, our research team, for all that's gone into creating these pieces. We have a real commitment to bringing our members and the industry poignant, factual, credible, and free to access research. So thank you again, Carousell, for helping bring all of this information to the table. And I think that it helps empower people to show the huge differences between local, regional, and global that is really unique to the markets that we conducted these surveys in.
Yeah.
So Sanya, any final words from you?
Yeah, I mean, just thank you, Miranda and Adele and your research team. It's been absolutely a pleasure doing it. And I've just loved working on it. I've learned so much about the users I'm talking to. I've learned so much more about the industry. I've learned so much from you, Miranda. So it's been great. And I hope that the people who've been listening in today also have had some takeaways. But this is like, I can't tell you, this is just a taste of it. Like the amount of insights that we've gotten in those individual reports has been amazing to go through. So I hope all of you find the time to get through those as well.
Amazing. Thank you, Sanya. The recording will be on our YouTube channel tomorrow. The reports will all be available tomorrow. Thank you everybody for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.